Imagine graduating high school at 18 and striding into an airline cockpit by age 23. That sounds like a fantasy, right? Many young aviation enthusiasts are captivated by this ambitious timeline. In an era where major airlines are even seeing 25-year-old first officers on Boeing 767s, this is something considered inconceivable a decade ago. It's natural to wonder if you could be one of them. With airlines hiring aggressively in recent years and stories of ultra-young pilots becoming captains, the allure of a 5-year sprint from novice to commercial airline pilot is stronger than ever. But is it realistically possible? In this comprehensive guide, we're going to break down the journey step by step from your high school diploma to the right-hand seat of an airliner. We're going to examine the pathways, challenges, costs, and hard truths behind the 5-year pilot program. I'm going to interrupt the video for a second. I was looking at the YouTube analytics the other day, and I learned that over 90% of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed. So if you enjoy my videos and you'd like to see more, it would mean the world to me if you'd consider subscribing. I'd really like to get that number to at least 50-50. Back to the video. There are so many examples of exceptionally young airline pilots that fuel the dream of an accelerated career path. The idea of becoming an airline pilot at only 5 years is undeniably alluring. For one, it means starting your career while barely in your 20s, giving you a tremendous head start in an industry where seniority is everything. Airline pilots advance in rank and get better schedules and pay based on seniority, which only accumulates once you're hired. Joining an airline sooner means potentially 40+ years of seniority ahead of you, a huge long-term advantage. It's no wonder many ambitious young people set their sights on the fastest route possible. Another part of the appeal is the current and forecasted demand for pilots. In the early 2020s, airlines went on unprecedented hiring sprees due to industry growth and a wave of retirements. Pilots who just a few years ago would have been flight instructing into their late 20s and suddenly found themselves in an airline training class at 21 or 22. For example, one 26-year-old became a Delta Airlines 737 captain, something practically unheard of at a major airline until recent times. United Airlines hired a 25-year-old first officer to fly the Boeing 767, proving that the fast-track path can indeed lead to big jets at a young age. These real-life cases inspire the question, if they can do it, why not you? The 5-year plan has a nice ring to it. It's a career pipeline that promises a kind of instant gratification in a field that traditionally required patience. There's a sense of beating the system or accomplishing something extraordinary. It's almost a challenge or a dare. Can you really pull it off? For many, it's not just about the prestige of flying for an airline. It's also about proving that with enough dedication, you can compress what used to be an 8 to 10 year journey into half that time. Why specifically 5 years? It often comes down to key age and experience milestones. In the US, 23 is the minimum age for an unrestricted airline transport pilot certificate, or ATP. This is required to be a captain or to serve as a first officer without any restrictions. However, you can serve as an airline first officer younger than 23 under certain conditions, but we'll talk more about that later. Essentially, 5 years from age 18, which is roughly 23 years old, is around the absolute earliest that an average civilian could meet the strict requirements to fly for an airline. So 5 years is an aggressive, yet theoretical, attainable timeline under ideal circumstances. Finally, the allure is also practical. The sooner you start earning an airline pilot's salary, the faster you can start paying off training debt and start enjoying the benefits of the career. Airline pilot pay has improved in recent years, especially at regional airlines, making the career even more attractive. New first officers at regional airlines today can earn in their first year what used to take years to reach. Some regionals now offer starting pay in the range of $80,000 to $90,000 or more, including bonuses, reflecting the demand. If you can land that job by 22 or 23, you'll be leagues ahead of peers in other fields in terms of income and career progression. That's a powerful motivator to sprint through the training. However, the 5-year path isn't all glamour and excitement. To decide if it's realistic, you need to understand exactly what those 5 years would entail. It's time to look at how one would lay the groundwork right from high school graduation. The foundation, high school and beyond. Your journey from high school to the captain's chair begins long before you ever touch an airplane's controls. Laying a strong foundation in the years immediately after high school is critical, and it involves careful planning about education, training, and finances. Let's break down the key building blocks in this foundational stage. One way that you can derail this entire plan before you even start is by choosing the wrong flight school. I see it all the time. Students pick the wrong flight school, and it adds years and tens of thousands of dollars to their journey. That's why I created an entire course. It's only $30, and it will save you potentially thousands of dollars and years of time. It comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee. If it's something that interests you, check it out down below. Number 1, deciding on a training path. College versus flight school versus the other choices. Right after high school, you have a pivotal choice. Do you enroll in a university aviation program or jump straight into an intensive flight training program? Each route has pros and cons. University aviation program, 4-year college. Many aspiring airline pilots choose to attend a college that offers a degree in aviation or a related field alongside flight training. Programs at schools like Embry-Riddle, University of North Dakota, Purdue, Ohio State, and many others allow you to earn pilot certificates and ratings while also getting a bachelor's degree. The big advantage here is eligibility for a restricted ATP at a lower flight hour threshold if the college is an FAA-authorized Part 141 program with an aviation degree. Graduates can get hired by an airline with 1,000 flight hours if it's a bachelor's degree, or 1,250 if it's an associate's degree, instead of the full 1,500 hours. This is a 250 to 500 hour head start that can save you many months of time building. Additionally, a 4-year degree may make you more competitive for major airlines down the road. Very few majors technically say that they require a bachelor's degree anymore, but a lot of them prefer it. The downside? It takes 4 years of school, which by itself consumes the majority of the 5-year timeline. You'll likely finish college around age 22, and it's expensive. You have to pay university tuition plus flight training costs, which can easily push the total cost well above $150,000 for a 4-year program. We'll discuss finances more shortly, but suffice to say, a university path can be one of the most expensive ways to become a pilot, though financing and scholarships exist. Let's talk about accelerated flight schools. Another route is to skip the traditional college experience and enroll directly in an intensive flight training program, often nicknamed Zero to Hero programs. Schools such as ATP Flight School, American Flyers, CAE, and many others offer curricula to take you from zero flight experience to commercial pilot with instructor ratings in a short time frame. For example, ATP Flight School's Airline Career Pilot program advertises that you can go from zero experience to commercial pilot, single and multi-engine with CFI and II ratings in about 7 to 9 months of full-time training. These programs are fast-paced and rigorous, often flying and studying full-time, treating it like a job. The benefit is speed. You could be done with all your primary training before age 19 or 20. That leaves the rest of the 5-year window for working and building flight hours and earning money sooner. Many regional airlines and flight schools have partners that funnel graduates of these academies directly into instructor jobs or even airline cadet positions. Some airlines have their own program, like United Airlines Aviate program, American Airlines Cadet Academy, Delta Propel. These create a structured pathway from training to an airline rate seat. These can sometimes offer tuition assistance or conditional job offers early on. The cost of an accelerated program is significant, often in the ballpark of $80,000 to $120,000 for all your ratings. For instance, one well-known academy estimates about $87,000 to $117,000 from zero to CFI when done in an accelerated format. It's a huge sum up front, often financed via loans. But the argument is you'll start earning an airline salary a few years sooner to offset it. Not needing a 4-year degree here means you save time potentially reaching an airline 3 to 4 years earlier than those who go to college. The risk is that you are putting all of your eggs in the aviation basket immediately, no traditional degree as a backup. However, note that some pilots who skip college initially do later complete an online degree while flying. For example, a young 777 First Officer Connor Shields took a university courses online while already flying professionally. The industry's stance on degrees is evolving. The FAA doesn't require a degree at all for any pilot certificates, and many regional airlines don't require one either. Several major airlines have also dropped the formal degree requirement for hiring, though it remains a plus. So going straight to flight school is a viable path many choose to shave years off of the timeline. Military path. A historically common route to the airlines is through military service as a pilot. However, going from high school to airline in 5 years via the military is generally not realistic. Why? Well, to be a military pilot in the Air Force or Navy, you usually need a college degree beforehand. Military pilot training itself takes around 1 to 2 years, and then there's typically a service commitment, often around 8 to 10 years of active duty, before you can leave for an airline job. That timeline easily stretches well beyond 5 years, There are some exceptions. For example, the Army's Warrant Officer program for helicopter pilots doesn't require a college degree, and a few have transitioned to airline jobs after their service, but they still need to convert all of their ratings and build fixed-wing hours. It's not a quick route. The military path does offer unparalleled training quality and the benefit of a 750-hour ATP minimum. Military pilots can get an ATP at 750 hours due to their training caliber. But realistically, you won't be in an airline cockpit at 23 if you go military. You'd still be in training or junior first officer stages. One hybrid possibility is joining the Air National Guard or Reserve unit as a pilot, where you could potentially serve part-time after training and maybe fly for airlines concurrently, but those slots are highly competitive and still require years of training. For the scope of our 5-year civilian plan, we won't focus on the military route, hybrid, or other paths. Some people start at a local flight school, non-accelerated, while working part-time or attending community college. This might save you money up front, because you pay as you go, but it can take longer to get your ratings, often well beyond the 1-year mark just to finish commercial. It might not meet the 5-year goal unless you ramp up later. Another hybrid scenario is doing a 2-year aviation associate's degree at a community college or smaller school that has a flight program. This can get you an associate's degree plus your pilot certificates by about age 20. With that, you might qualify for the 1250-hour restricted ATP at age 21, if the program is approved and you have the credit hours in aviation. A 2-year program could be a compromise. You get some college education and a degree, but still move relatively fast. Just ensure the school has the FAA authorization so that your restricted ATP hour reduction counts. Number 2, laying academic and knowledge groundworks. Whether or not you choose college, your late teens and early 20s are a time to absorb a lot of knowledge. Flying isn't just about logging hours. There are multiple FAA written exams, oral exams, and check rides along the way for each certificate. A strong foundation in subjects like math, physics, and English for communication skills helps. If you're still in high school and eyeing this path, focus on doing well in science and math classes. They'll help with understanding aerodynamics and navigation. Equally important is developing good study habits and self-discipline. Accelerated pilot training is like academic boot camp, often requiring memorizing aircraft systems, regulations, and procedures in a very short amount of time. Some high school programs offer aviation courses or let you take an introductory flight. If available, take advantage of these to get a taste and possibly complete some ground school knowledge. Consider obtaining your private pilot's license while in high school or the summer after graduation if feasible. Some ambitious teens solo at 16 and get their PPL at 17, which is the minimum age for a private pilot. Having a PPL before you start a professional training program can save you time and money. It not only confirms your passion for flying, but also means when you enroll in an academy or college program, you're already a step ahead. Many programs, including ATP Flight School, give you a shortened timeline and reduced cost if you come in with a PPL. For example, saving about 3 months and some thousands of dollars. Hold on, we're going to fix this lighting. Is that going to be too dark? Oh no, there we go. However, pursuing a PPL early requires funds and planning. If that's not in reach, don't worry, you'll do it as part of your training pipeline. Number 3, financial planning and reality check. Let's talk money. One of the biggest hurdles to becoming a commercial pilot is the cost of training. It's not cheap, but it's an investment in your career. Early in your journey, you need a plan for how to finance the next few years. The costs include private pilot training, instrument rating, commercial license, multi-engine rating, and usually a flight instructor certificate, so that you can earn money while building hours. In 2025, going from 0 to commercial pilot with instructor ratings is going to cost you in the order of $70,000, $100,000 plus in the United States, depending on the route. Prestigious university programs might run even higher when you factor in tuition. Some estimates put a 4-year aviation degree total at about $200,000 or more. For example, one accelerated flight academy compared their cost of $80,000 versus a private university aviation program at $280,000 for 4 years. These are daunting figures. So how do you tackle this? Loans and financing. Many flight students take out loans. There are specialized loan products for pilot training. For instance, flight academies like ATP have partnerships with lenders for training loans. If you go to college, you can often get federal student loans or private loans to cover tuition and flight fees. Be mindful of the debt. Starting your career with $100,000 in loans is common for pilots, but you should understand the repayment and be able to manage. The good news is, airline salaries, especially after a few years, can support loan payments, but in the first couple of years, money will be tight. Scholarships and military options. Look for scholarships from organizations like AOPA, EAA, universities, or local aviation clubs. They won't usually cover everything, but every little bit helps. Some airlines offer cadet programs that include tuition assistance or reimbursement. For example, American Airlines Cadet Program and various regional airline cadet pipelines will reimburse reimburse some of your training costs once you become their employee. This is often paid in installments as you reach certain milestones. It might not reduce upfront costs, but it helps on the back end. Work and save. Some individuals work a job for a year or two after high school to save up and then start training. If you're aiming for 5-year total, you don't really have the luxury of deferring training too long. But one strategy could be working part-time while training to at least cover living expenses. Keep in mind, though, that full-time accelerated training leaves little time for work. It's often an all-in commitment. The bottom line is you need to treat your pilot training like an investment in a professional career. Plan how to fund it, and keep your spending in check during those years. If finances are extremely tight, a slower approach, like doing training in stages at a local airport while working, might be necessary. But that can conflict with the 5-year goal. There's no way around it. Becoming an airline pilot is a significant upfront expense, but the career earning potential is high. Senior airline captains can earn $400,000 plus per year. It can absolutely pay off if done wisely. Number 4. The support system. Don't underestimate the importance of having a support network. Going from zero to airline pilot in a short time is intense. Support from family or mentors can make a huge difference. If your parents or guardians are on board, perhaps helping with finances or even just moral support, you'll be in a better position. Connecting with others on the same path. Flight school classmates, online forums like r/flying subreddit or others can provide guidance and encouragement. Some high schoolers are fortunate to have an aviation mentor or be part of programs like Civil Air Patrol or local flight clubs. These can offer a leg up in terms of experience and networking. By the end of the foundation stage, ideally you have chosen your path, college versus academy, sorted out financing as best as possible, and perhaps even started on your first pilot's license. You're now ready to dive into the real meat of the journey. The frenzied race through training, and the all-important hour-building stage that stands between you and the airlines. Buckle up because it's going to be a fast and demanding ride. The sprint, accelerated training, and time building. This phase is where the rubber meets the runway. It's an all-out sprint to go from a brand new pilot to an experienced aviator, with the hours and qualifications to land an airline interview. The word sprint is appropriate because we're assuming you will be moving as fast as practical. There are 2 parts here: initial training, licenses and ratings, and hour building to meet airline minimums. Let's tackle each one in order. Accelerated flight training, getting your licenses. In a 5-year plan, the initial training portion needs to be completed quickly. Typically, this involves earning at a minimum your private pilot's license, which allows you to fly small aircraft for fun, but not get paid. Instrument rating, which allows you to fly in poor weather and fog by reference to the instruments. Your commercial pilot's license, which allows you to be paid to fly. Your multi-engine rating, which allows you to fly twin-engine aircraft. Your certified flight instructor, and possibly your CFII, or an instrument instructor, and MEI, which is your multi-engine instructor. These allow you to teach others and log flight hours while getting paid, although it be very little, which is the most common way to build hours. In a traditional part-time training environment, getting all these might take several years, but in an accelerated full-time program, you could knock them out roughly as follows. Private pilot, about 2 to 4 months with an accelerated course. Your instrument rating is about 2 months after your private. Commercial single engine is 1 to 2 months after instrument. This requires you hitting that 250-hour milestone, which you'll build during training. Commercial multi-engine add-on, typically a few weeks, although some programs integrate multi-engine training into the commercial phase. CFI MEI, about 2 to 3 months to train for instructor certificates after getting your commercial. In total, a highly motivated student in an academy environment could go from 0 to CFI in roughly 12 months or less. In fact, some anecdotal cases are even faster. For instance, one accelerated student noted completing instrument through instructor in 80 days, though that is exceptionally fast and not typical. More commonly, around 9 to 12 months is a realistic aggressive pace for all ratings if weather, financing, and scheduling align. Keep in mind, accelerated training is demanding. It's often Monday through Friday with flight lessons or simulator sessions nearly every day, studying every night, and stage checks and tests frequently. The risk of burnout is real. It's not uncommon for students in the fast track program to feel overwhelmed. If you get burned out or start failing check rides from stress, it can actually set you back and cost you time. So while sprinting, you have to maintain a sustainable pace for yourself. Taking care of your health, getting rest, and sometimes accepting a slight slowdown to really master a skill can be wiser than crashing and burning, figuratively. Think of it as a marathon run at a brisk speed rather than an all-out 100-meter dash. You need endurance. Hour building, the 1,500-hour gauntlet. After initial training, most pilots have somewhere around 250 hours, give or take a few, depending depending on how many extra hours they built during training. For an airline job in the US, unless you fall under the special exceptions, you will need 1,500 hours of total flight time to get hired as a first officer. This is due to the FAA's 1,500-hour rule, which we will discuss more in the next section. That leaves you with about 1,250 hours to build after getting your commercial license. This phase is often the longest single portion of the journey. And in a 5-year plan, you're trying to compress this as much as possible, ideally into roughly 2 years or less. How do you build 1,250 hours quickly and hopefully get it paid while doing it? Here are the most common routes. Flight instructing, or CFI. This is by far the most common method new pilots use to build hours. You get to teach other students how to fly. As a CFI, every hour you spend instructing in the air counts towards your experience. If you also obtained your instrument instructor or II and multi-engine instructor MEI ratings, you can teach instrument students and multi-engine students. This is going to help you diversify your hours, and in today's hiring market, multi-engine hours in particular are valuable for airline applications. Flight instructors can build hours fast if they are at a busy flight school. It's not unheard of to fly 80 to 100 hours per month as an instructor in a high-demand environment, especially in good weather climates. At that rate, one could log about 1,000 hours in about 12 to 15 months. Bold Method, a pilot training resource, notes that in one day as an instructor, flying 6 to 8 hours is very possible, which used to be 2 weeks of flying as a student. Instructing really multiplies your flight time. Many schools report that an active CFI can accumulate the required hours in 18 months to 2 years. In fact, over 90% of civilian pilots historically built their time instructing. It's the tried and true path. The advantages: you hone your flying skills by teaching. There's really truth to the saying you learn by teaching. You stay immersed in aviation, and you typically earn at least a somewhat modest wage while doing so instead of paying for hours. The downsides? Well, instructing can be very challenging and sometimes monotonous. You might be drilling basic maneuvers with beginners over and over, long days in hot small planes, etc. The pay, well, it's improved at some schools, is not great. It's often hourly and very dependent on student load. Burnout is something to watch for. Instructor fatigue is an issue since you might be flying and pre-flighting from dawn to dusk. But for most, it's the fastest and most accessible way to reach 1,500 hours. Part 135 charter or cargo flying. Part 135 refers to FAA regulations for commuters, commuter on-demand charter, and cargo operations, often smaller aircraft, not airlines. Some low-hour pilots, 300 to 500 hours, get jobs flying for small charter companies, air taxi services, or cargo feeders. A classic example is Ameriflight or Boutique Air, or other small operators that fly turboprops like Beechcraft 99 or Cessna Caravans, carrying cargo or a handful of passengers on regional routes. These jobs sometimes have lower hour requirements than airlines. Example: some require 500 to 750 hours for a first officer, but as a captain under IFR, you need 1,200 hours. Pilots like Connor Shields, which we talked about earlier, built time by going to Ameriflight after instructing, where he flew a Beech 99 freighter. Such jobs can build multi-engine turbine time, which is excellent experience and often pay better than instructing. However, they may not be easy to get at very low hours unless the hiring market is very hot. In the peak of the pilot shortage, some Part 135 operators were indeed hiring sub-500 hour pilots, especially if you had an ATP written exam done and maybe a recommendation. If you can land one of these gigs early, it's possible to reach 1,500 hours by doing a year or two of full-time flying on scheduled routes, often in all weather, which is great exposure. It is a bit of faster pace. Some cargo pilots fly multiple legs a day. The downside: Part 135 jobs can be very demanding. For example, flying cargo at night, single pilot in IFR, and sometimes have a steep learning curve for relatively inexperienced pilots. Banner towing, skydive pilots, aerial survey, crop dusting, etc. There are many niche flying jobs that one can do with a commercial license and relatively low hours. Towing advertising banners over beaches, flying skydivers in a Cessna all day long, doing pipeline and power line patrols, aerial photography, survey flights, firefighting support, traffic reporting, the list is long. These jobs can be a way to get paid to fly and build hours. They often have minimal hour requirements, sometimes around 500 hours to start. The pay is usually low and the flying might be repetitive, but to some extent logbook hours are logbook hours. One strategy some use is a combination: instruct on weekdays and fly skydivers on the weekends, for example, to rack up more time. Variety can help reduce burnout too. That said, these jobs may not be available or practical in all areas. Banner towing might only be available at seasonal on beaches, and etc. And some are higher risk. One note here: crop dusting in particular is a specialized, dangerous job, and it's not usually something you jump into early on without specific training. building hours on your own. Not ideal, but possible. If one had financial means, they could theoretically rent or buy a small plane and fly it to build experience. This is extremely costly between fuel, maintenance, etc., and very few people do it for the full requirement. However, anecdotally, a few pilots have purchased a small plane, built 500 to 1,000 hours touring around, then sold the airplane. It's a fringe approach, and you'd need substantial money up front. Most prefer to get paid to fly rather than pay more to fly at this stage. Maximizing hour building efficiency. To achieve the 5-year timeline, you'll want to hit the ground running once you have your commercial and instructor ticket. Many flight schools that you train at will offer you a job as an instructor if you did well in their program. This is a very common pipeline that you see across the industry. They get to grow their own instructors. This is ideal because you get to transition seamlessly from training to teaching. If you're in a college program, often your junior or senior year, you can work as an instructor for underclassmen starting to log hours before you even graduate. Networking can also accelerate your progress. For instance, if you network into a Part 135 job at low hours thanks to a recommendation, that might leapfrog you ahead. Be aware of a few regulatory hurdles during this phase. To be a flight instructor, you must be at least 18, which you will be, and hold a commercial license. To carry passengers for hire under certain conditions, like at night or on an instrument flight plan under Part 135, you might need more hours. For example, Part 135 PIC for IFR requires 1,200 hours of total time among other criteria. But typically you'll be building hours either as instructing or as second in command of some op until you meet those milestones. It's worth noting that instructing for 1.5 to 2 years is not the only way. As discussed, some pilots mix instructing with a jump to a small 135 op or cargo at the 700 to 1,000 hours if the market allows. In recent years, in 2022 and 2023, the pilot shortage was so huge that regional airlines created bridge programs. They would hire you as an instructor at a partner school or even as a paid cadet while you build time. Then you get to flow directly into an FO slot when you hit 1,500 hours. Some regionals even were giving new hire class dates to pilots with, say, 1,200 hours contingent on them reaching 1,500 by that date, effectively pre-hiring them. In 2025, hiring has normalized a bit. We'll talk more about that later, but these pipelines still exist and can give you a peace of mind and sometimes financial stipends while you finish accumulating your hours. Let's put the sprint phase into a timeline perspective. Suppose you finish high school at 18 and immediately start an accelerated program in, say, July. By the next summer, age 19, you could have your commercial and CFI. You then instruct from age 19 to 21, and by 21 you manage to accrue 1,500 hours. This is extremely fast but not unheard of. As One Flight Academy notes, a focus student can go from 0 time to airline eligible in about 2 years. More typically, it might take closer to 3 years from the start of training to reach 1,500 hours for a very hardworking individual. That would put you at age 21 or 22 with the magic number of flight hours in your logbook. Remember though, even if you hit the hours at 21, you might still face an age barrier for the next step. You must be 21 to work as an airline pilot at all, even with a restricted license, and 23 for an unrestricted ATP. If you manage to reach those hours by, say, age 20, you're essentially stuck instructing or flying other jobs until you turn 21 to be hireable by an airline. That's not a bad problem to have. More experience won't hurt. But something to keep in mind, realistically 21 is the youngest you will see anyone at a regional airline due to regulations. During this sprint, you will also want to prepare for airline applications and interviews in any spare moments. That might sound premature, but it isn't. Some airlines allow you to interview well before you meet all the requirements, offering you a conditional job offer. You'll need to have a resume ready, possibly a LinkedIn profile, and certainly you'll want no violations or serious FAA check ride failures on your record. This means don't cut corners in training. Failing a check ride, say busting your instrument test, is not the end of the world. Many pilots have one hiccup and still get hired. But multiple failures can raise red flags later, so even while you're rushing, put in the work to pass your tests properly. Many airlines also require an ATP certification training program, ATP-CTP course, completion, and a passed ATP written exam before you start class. The ATP-CTP is a short course, approximately 1 to 2 weeks, that includes some simulator training in airline-style jets, required before you can take the ATP knowledge test. Often, regional airlines will arrange ATP-CTP for new hires, or you can pay to do it on your own when you get close to 1,500 hours. It's not a huge obstacle, but just one more thing to schedule. By the end of the sprint, you have all required pilot certifications, the logbook hours well into 4 digits, and ideally a logbook that also shows some quality experience. Multi-engine time, maybe turbine time if possible, some cross-country flights, perhaps some experience in a crew environment. You're now on the doorstep of your goal. The next hurdle, actually obtaining the ATP certificate and getting hired by an airline. It's time to examine the transition from hour building to airline cockpit and the challenges that come with it. The hurdle, ATP and airline hiring. Now we arrive at the critical threshold between being an aspiring pilot and an airline pilot. There are two major hurdles here, meeting the legal requirements for an airline transport pilot certificate and navigating the hiring process in the airline industry's current climate. Let's break down both, the ATP certificate and 1500-hour rule. The ATP Airline Transport Pilot Certificate is the highest level of pilot certification. By law, in the U.S., airline pilots, captains, and first officers at passenger airlines under Part 121 must hold an ATP or restricted ATP. A full unrestricted ATP requires minimum age of 23, total flight time of at least 1,500 hours with specific sub-requirements like 500 hours across country, 100 hours of night, etc. A commercial pilot's license with instrument rating as a prerequisite, successful completion of the ATP written and practical exams, and the ATP-CTP course prior to the written, as mentioned. In 2013, following a push for higher safety standards after a fatal regional airline crash, the 1,500-hour rule took effect. This drastically changed the landscape for young pilots. Before then, one could potentially get hired at a regional with just 250 hours, your commercial license, and a multi-engine rating. Now, for most pilots, 1,500 hours is non-negotiable. There are, however, the exceptions we touched on. Restricted ATP at 1,000 hours. If you've graduated with a 4-year bachelor's degree in aviation from an FAA-approved program and have the requisite coursework and Part 141 training, you can get a restricted ATP at 1,000 hours and age 21. Restricted ATP at 1,250 hours if you have an appropriate 2-year associate's degree in aviation or if you have a bachelor's but with less aviation credit hours. You can get restricted ATP at 1,250 hours, also a minimum age of 21. Military pilots at 750 hours. Pilots with military training can obtain a restricted ATP at 750 hours in age 21. Everyone else, 1,500 hours, and typically you'll be 21 or older by the time you have that many hours regardless. For our 5-year planner coming out of high school, what does this mean? If you did not go the college route, you're looking at 1,500 hours and age 21 at least for a restricted ATP. Age 21 is the earliest you can exercise ATP privileges even with the restricted hours. If you went through a college aviation degree program, you might be able to get hired at 1,000 hours in age 21 to 22, shaving perhaps a year off of your time building. But remember, the college route itself took 4 years, so depending on when you started flying in college, you might still be around 22 by the time you're hitting 1,000 hours, most likely through instructing in senior year and maybe just a little bit after graduation. So either way, you're bumping up against the age 21 to 23 window when you finally meet the ATP requirements. It's important to note that holding an ATP certificate is not actually required to be hired as a first officer. You can be hired with just the required hours and then complete the ATP requirements during training. However, practically, most airlines want you to have at least passed the ATP written exam and be eligible for the certificate. Many new hire pilots get their ATP issued at the end of airline training or just before starting airline duties. The key is having those hours and having done the ATP CTP course and written exam. One nuance, if you arrive at an airline with a restricted ATP, say age 21 and 1,250 hours from an associate's degree program, you will function the same as any other first officer, but you cannot upgrade to captain until you meet the full ATP requirements. For example, 23 years old and 1,500 hours. That's not usually an issue since upgrading to captain in less than 2 years at an airline is very rare, except in extreme shortage situations. But it's something to be aware of. Your ATP will automatically lose the restricted limitation when you turn 23, assuming that you have your hours by then. Airline hiring in 2025, trends and realities. Okay, you've got the hours or you're about to. How easy or hard will it be to land that airline job within the 5-year mark? The answer can depend on industry hiring cycles. The period from roughly 2018 through 2023 saw a massive pilot hiring boom in the United States, especially rebounding after the pandemic. In 2022, major airlines hired a record number of pilots, over 13,000, and in 2023, around 12,000 were hired. This was great for anyone coming up the ranks. Regionals were desperate for pilots, raising pay, offering bonuses, and taking people as soon as they hit their 1,500 hours, sometimes even slightly before with the condition they finish up their hours before starting. However, by 2024 and into 2025, the hiring frenzy has cooled off a bit. According to industry data, U.S. major airlines hired only about 4,834 pilots in 2024, down sharply from the previous year's 12,000. Early 25 saw hiring levels return to around pre-pandemic norms, not a crash, but a stabilization. Some airlines went from hiring hundreds of pilots per month to just a handful or even pauses in hiring. Does this mean your 5-year plan is in jeopardy? Not necessarily. The slowdown in hiring in 2024 and 2025 is largely a return to a sustainable pace rather than a bust. It's partially because airlines overhired in the peak years to address shortages, and now they're digesting those additions. Importantly, the long-term pilot shortage drivers are still in place. Thousands of airline pilots at major carriers will be reaching the mandatory retirement age of 65 each year through the rest of the decade, with a peak around 26 and 27. This means airlines will continue to need pilots. The opportunities are still abound according to industry experts, even if you might not get multiple job offers the moment you hit 1,500 like some did in 2022. For someone starting training now or recently, by the time you're ready for airline hiring, say 3 to 5 years from now, those retirements will be creating vacancies. The regional airlines, which serve as a stepping stone to the majors, are under particular pressure. When the majors hire, they often hire from the regionals' experienced ranks, which forces regionals to backfill with new pilots. That dynamic is continuing. In the past, regionals have offered very attractive packages to new pilots. It's worth mentioning, many regionals have dramatically increased starting salaries. For example, a few years ago, a first officer at a regional might have made $30,000, but now it can be as high as $80,000 to $90,000, including bonuses, thanks to new union contract and bonus schemes. This is to attract talent. Signing bonuses and tuition reimbursement programs are common. Airlines like Envoy, PSA, or Piedmont, which feed American Airlines, or SkyWest, Republic, etc., in the past have offered $15,000 plus signing bonuses or payouts to help cover training loans if you commit to them. Cadet programs. If you affiliated with an airline cadet program early during your hour building phase, you likely have a flow or guaranteed interview lined up. For instance, some pilots join a cadet program at 500 hours, get mentorship and some financial incentives, and then get placed into an airline class date when they hit their required hours. The hiring process itself typically involves an application, an interview, which can include technical questions, behavioral questions, sometimes a simulator evaluation or cognitive test. Regionals in a high demand time have fairly high acceptance rates. They need pilots, so they're not super picky, beyond ensuring you meet standards and are a good safety-minded person. In 2022 and 2023, some regionals would interview candidates with maybe 500 hours and offer them conditional jobs pending them reaching 1,500 hours. In 2025, with a bit less frenzy, they might wait till you're closer to being ready. But still, the hiring bar at regionals is not excessively high if you meet the 1,500-hour rule and have a good record. A first attempt failure on a check ride or two is usually okay. Common wisdom says less than 2 check ride busts is fine, however, over 3 might raise an eyebrow. If you had a DUI or something in your past, that obviously could be problematic for hiring. So obviously, keeping a clean record, personally and professionally, is important. Airline training class availability. One thing to consider is timing your completion of hours with the availability of training classes. Airlines run new hire classes at certain intervals. If they only need a small number of pilots, you might finish your 1,500 hours and have to wait a few months for a class slot. That still counts as within your timeline. You're technically hired even if you're awaiting class. But it might mean you hit 5 years and you're in indeterminate limbo for a bit. To hedge, many pilots nearing their hours will apply to multiple regional airlines to see who will give them a class date first. This is very common. Just be careful with any commitments and don't accept multiple offers simultaneously in bad faith. Alternative, Part 135 to Airline Direct. A quick note, another way to technically achieve commercial airline pilot in 5 years could be go to a small airline, like a Part 135 scheduled operator, which aren't bound by the 1,500-hour rule. If the operation is not Part 121, some very small airlines, like certain commuter operations with 9-seat planes, might not require an ATP. But those are edge cases, and typically one would still want to progress to a Part 121 airline for a stable career. Physical and logistical challenges. We should also acknowledge the personal hurdle here. By the time you are at this stage, you've been grinding hard for several years. You might have moved far away from home, common for flight training or instructing jobs. You likely have accumulated debt, and you've possibly put some normal life aspects on hold, like your social life, other education, etc. The transition to an airline job can be stressful in its own right. Airline initial training is rigorous. You'll be learning to operate a complex jet, often in a crew, and learning company procedures. It's like drinking from a fire hose again. Just when you thought you were done with studying all night, it can also involve relocating to a crew base city and dealing with being on probation or reserve, on call. The reason to bring this up is some pilots at this juncture feel burnout or question if the hustle was worth it. It's crucial to remember your passion for flying here. As FAPA's executive editor Tim Jenk said, you have to love aviation. If the smell of jet fuel does something for you, the industry will have a place for you. That is a nod to the idea that this career is tough and demands love for the craft to push through challenges. Airline or alternatives at year 5. Let's say things didn't go 100% to plan. Maybe you have 1,000 hours at year 5 and instead of 1,500, or hiring slowed down more than expected. Does that mean failure? Not necessarily. Even if at exactly the 5-year mark you're not in an airline cockpit, you could be very close. Perhaps you are about to finish your hours in a few months, or you choose to take a slightly longer route for personal reasons, like pursuing a degree. The goal here isn't to set an arbitrary deadline that, if missed, renders everything moot. It's to see how close to that lower bound of time one can get. Plenty of pilots might take 6, 7, or 8 years to get to the airlines due to various circumstances, and that's fine. They still often have decades of career ahead. The key is, if you aim for 5 and end up at 6, you are still pretty darn efficient. To sum up this hurdle section, yes, it's possible to meet the legal requirement in about 3 to 5 years post-high school. And yes, airlines are hiring young pilots when they come out, especially at regionals. The 1,500-hour rule is a hard gate, but has some workarounds with education. Hiring fluctuates, but the need for pilots isn't going away in the foreseeable future. If you're prepared and flexible, you can absolutely go from flight instructor or cargo pilot 1 month to an airline first officer next month. We're almost at the verdict of whether all this is realistic or just a risky moonshot. Before that, let's recap the obstacles. Achieving required flight experience by around age 21 to 23. It's demanding, but doable with full commitment. Navigating the financial strain and avoiding burnout through training. Timing your entry with industry hiring waves, partly luck, partly planning. Meeting stringent regulatory and hiring standards without cutting corners. Safety and competence can't be rushed. With these in mind, let's deliver the final verdict on the big question. The verdict: realistic or risky? After exploring the entire journey, it's time to answer, can you really go from a high school graduate to a commercial airline pilot in 5 years? The verdict is that it is conditionally realistic, but it comes with significant risks and caveats. Let's break down the conclusion into pros, cons, and considerations for anyone contemplating this path. Why it's realistic, pros and evidence for the fast track. Proven examples. We've seen that in today's aviation landscape, some individuals have achieved this feat already. Pilots in their early 20s are out there flying for airlines, something that was extremely rare in the past. The story of a 21-year-old regional airline first officer is no longer fiction. It's reality in some cases. Even more dramatically, a pilot like Connor Shields managed to go from 0 time to a 777 cockpit by age 22 through an intense and dedicated program. These examples prove that with the right combination of hard work, opportunities, and timing, the 5-year timeline is not impossible. Industry demand supports it. The ongoing demand for pilots provides a tailwind. Airlines want pilots sooner and creating pathways to expedite training. For instance, major airlines and regionals have partnerships with flight schools to identify talent early. The sheer need for replacements due to retirement, with pilot shortages projected to continue through this decade. That means that as soon as you meet the qualification, there's likely a spot for you. Unlike in decades past where you might have to wait years for a vacancy, today a young pilot can move into an airline seat relatively quickly. This demand is a key reason the fast track is even considered. If airlines needed older, highly seasoned pilots only, there would be no rush to getting 1,500 hours, but regionals will happily take a qualified 21 or 22-year-old in 2025, especially if that pilot is well-trained and professional. Structured pathways exist. The 5-year journey can be made less chaotic by plugging into structured programs. University aviation programs are basically structured to get you from freshman year to regional airline by graduation, plus maybe a year. AB Initio academies are structured to churn out airline-ready pilots on a tight timeline. Some even quote 0 to airline in about 2.5 years in their marketing. If you follow these curricula strictly, you have a roadmap rather than wandering your own way. That increases the feasibility immensely. It's still up to you to perform, but at least you're not reinventing the wheel. Others have done it, and the program's success story can guide you. Personal drive and youthful advantage. Being 18 to 23 years old can actually be an advantage in some ways. You likely have fewer obligations, no family to support yet, more flexibility to move for opportunities, and maybe a bit of that youthful resilience to long days and stress. You might handle the demanding schedule better now than you would if you were, say, 35 and switching careers with kids at home. Also, learning to fly, like learning a language, can sometimes be easier when you're younger. You're in the student mindset fresh out of school. Many flight instructors comment that their college-age students pick up maneuvers and absorb knowledge faster than older students, though everyone varies. If you treat it like an all-consuming mission for a few years, your age can help by giving you energy and focus, so long as you channel it productively. Why it's risky. Cons and cautions. Burnout and quality of life. One of the biggest risks of cramming this process into 5 years is burnout. Flight training and instructing in rapid succession is mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausting. You might face periods of doubt, stress, and sheer fatigue. Burnout could cause you to quit or pause, which ironically could derail the whole plan. Even if you power through, you might come out the other end so exhausted that your initial passion is dimmed. We must remember that being a safe pilot is the top priority. If you're overly fatigued or rushing, you could develop bad habits or cut corners. Additionally, consider the personal life sacrifices. While your peers might be in college, socializing, or starting other careers, you'll be grinding away at study materials. Not everyone is willing to trade their late teens, early 20s fun for a single-minded, focused career. That's a personal decision, and balance is key and hard to achieve on this path. Financial risk. Taking on large debt assumes you will secure that airline job to pay it off. If something goes awry, for instance, an economic recession hits airlines. It has happened before. Airlines slowed hiring or furloughed pilots in downturns like after 9/11 or the pandemic. You might find yourself with loans and no airline paycheck. Or you might not complete training as fast as planned, meaning more money spent on living expenses or extra flight training. This path doesn't have the normal early 20s career earnings. You'll likely make very little as a CFI or in training. So you're financially vulnerable during these years. It's a leap of faith that the investment will pay off. You have to be okay with debt and have a contingency if hiring is delayed. For example, perhaps having a side skill or at least living cheaply until things improve. The good news is long term. The pilot career tends to be very lucrative. The bad news is short term. It's a financial sinkhole. That's risky for anyone, especially a young person without a safety net, skill, and experience depth. There is a subtle safety consideration. Being barely qualified may meet the letter of the law, but experience is not just a number. Critics, including some veteran pilots, have expressed concerns about very young low-hour pilots sitting in an airline. A comment from a retired airline captain seeing 23-year-old captains said it was a frightening sight because traditionally it took many years to accrue judgment and experience for that role. Now, airlines aren't going to put you in a position beyond your ability. You'll start as an FO with lots of training, but it's true that if you squeeze the timeline, you might not get a wide variety of flying experiences before you get to an airline. Compare a pilot who took 8 years, flew different planes, maybe some charter, etc., versus one who sprinted in 5 years mostly instructing at one airport. The breadth of experience is going to differ. This could affect how you handle novel situations. You can mitigate this by seeking diverse experiences where possible, different airports, weather, etc. during training. Modern airliners are very safe and have comprehensive training, so it's not to say you'll be unprepared, but it's a point to stay humble and keep learning when you're at the airline. Realize that you might initially have a steep learning curve, adjusting to jet operations, and should soak up wisdom from more seasoned colleagues. Dependency on external factors. The 5-year plan assumes relatively smooth sailing. No big personal or global disruptions. Life happens, you could face a medical issue that delays training. Every pilot must maintain a medical certificate. A health hiccup could halt your progress. Or a family issue that might pull you away, or you simply discover you need a break. On the global side, as mentioned, economic swings greatly affect airlines. If airlines aren't hiring when you're ready, you might wait it out by instructing longer or taking a different gig. That could push your timeline beyond 5 years through no fault of your own. This career has a lot of unpredictability. It's often said that the aviation industry is cyclical, with feast and famine cycles. Aiming for the minimum time means you have less buffer if something goes wrong. You've planned a tight connection, so to speak, any delay and you miss the schedule. Realistic expectation setting. For more people, a more realistic timeline might be somewhere between 5 and 7 years. 5 years is the optimistic scenario where everything lines up. You never fail a check ride, you find financing quickly, you blaze through training, you secure an instructor job right away, you fly a ton of hours without gaps, and you get an airline slot as soon as you're eligible. This is doable, and we gave an outline of how, but it's an ambitious project plan. If a student pilot asked me, should I try to do it in 5 years? Here's what I would say. You can set that as a goal, but don't be discouraged if it takes a bit longer. The difference between achieving it in 5 years versus, say, 6 years is minimal in the grand scheme of a 40-year career. It's also worth noting quality versus speed. You shouldn't sacrifice being a good, well-rounded pilot on the altar of a deadline. It's not a race in the end. Once you're at an airline, nobody really cares if you got your license in 1 year or 3 years. They care about how skilled you are and safe you are. So if at any point you find you need a little extra time to master something, maybe an extra few flight lessons or a break to avoid burnout, take it. That might mean the difference between 59 months and 61 months, which is a trivial difference if it makes you a better aviator and person. Closing thoughts. For a young, ambitious viewer considering an aviation career, know that time is on your side. Whether it's 5 years or 8 years, you have plenty of runway ahead in your life. The aviation career, even if it started in your mid-20s, can still yield decades of flying. The urgent rush some feel, I must get there ASAP, is often about that seniority and passion, which is understandable. Just be sure to enjoy the moment too. Those instructing days, those late night studying systems, and the first solo flight, or the first time you send a student to a check ride. These are incredibly rewarding moments that shouldn't be overshadowed entirely by the end goal. So, to wrap it up, is it realistically possible to go from high school grad to airline pilot in 5 years? Yes, it's possible. Our breakdown shows a feasible path and real-world cases that have done it. Is it risky? Undoubtedly yes. It requires significant personal and financial risks, relentless effort, and a bit of luck. It's not the right approach for everyone, and there's no shame in taking longer to ensure stability or savor the process. In conclusion, if you're a young person with aviation dreams, you should take away that the dream is achievable with dedication. You could be in the cockpit of a commercial airliner by your early 20s. But go in with eyes open, plan smartly, take care of yourself, and be adaptable. Whether it takes you 5 years or a few more, what matters is becoming a competent professional pilot ready to command the skies. Blue skies and tailwinds on your journey, and I'll see you next week.